The camera drone hovered 15 feet above the fighting pit, its lens capturing every movement for the Galactic Council's emergency session. Admiral Karen Foster stood at the edge of the reinforced glass barrier, watching as the Crothian champion circled the human volunteer. The alien stood 9 feet tall, its forearms ending in natural bone blades that had evolved over millions of years. Across the chamber, 300 council members from 40 different species watched their screens in silence. The human was a Marine named Derek Hayes. He had volunteered when the Crothians demanded a demonstration of combat capability before humanity could join the council. No weapons, no armor, just flesh against flesh. The Crothians believed this would humble the newcomers, show them their place in the galactic hierarchy. They had never lost one of these demonstrations. Derek moved differently than the aliens expected. His eyes tracked the Crothian with an intensity that made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. The Veltraxian ambassador leaned toward her aide and whispered something about predator focus. She had studied Earth's evolutionary history and recognized what she was seeing. The Crothian lunged forward with two of its blade arms extended. Derek didn't retreat. He stepped inside the attack arc, moving faster than the biological scanners predicted. His hand caught the alien's wrist joint and twisted with precise force. The crack of breaking chitin echoed through the chamber. The Crothian screamed, a sound that registered across multiple frequency ranges. Derek didn't stop. While the alien recoiled from its broken arm, he drove his elbow into the soft tissue beneath its jawplate. Impact lifted the massive creature off its feet. Before it could recover, Derek was behind it. His arm locked around what passed for a neck in Crothian anatomy. The pressure cut off the alien's air supply within seconds. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Half the species present had never seen a smaller creature defeat a larger one through pure violence. Their worlds had evolved differently, with size determining dominance, with ritual combat replacing lethal intent. They watched as Derek held the chokehold until the Crothian went limp, then released it carefully to the ground. Karen saw the change in the room's atmosphere. Fear. The Peltharian delegation was already moving toward the exits. The Xinthian council member had activated some kind of personal shield. On the main display, the camera zoomed in on Derek's face. His expression was calm, almost neutral, but his eyes still held that focused intensity. He wasn't celebrating his victory. He was scanning for the next threat. The head of the Crothian delegation stood abruptly, mandibles clicking and what their translators rendered as outrage. But Karen noticed something else in the alien's body language. Uncertainty. The Crothians had built their reputation on physical dominance, and a human half their champion's size had dismantled that reputation in under 90 seconds. The Council's military analyst, a Thorvian named Zelk, began speaking rapidly into his recording device. Karen caught fragments through the translation system. Words like apex predator, persistent hunter, endurance killer. Zelk was comparing humans to the extinct nightmare species from his homeworld's prehistoric era. Derek climbed out of the pit and walked to Karen's position. Medical drones swarmed the unconscious Crothian, stabilizing its injuries. The human's knuckles were bleeding, and bruises were already forming on his arms where he had blocked the initial attacks. He looked at Karen and asked a simple question that the open microphone broadcast to every council member. "Can I get some water?" The Galactic Council had invited humanity to prove itself worthy of membership. They had expected diplomacy, perhaps some technological demonstrations, maybe a cultural exchange. Instead, they got 90 seconds of footage that would change how every species in the chamber viewed the newest applicants. The video was already being downloaded by intelligence services across the galaxy, analyzed frame by frame, studied for tactical insights. In the council chamber, the Veltraxian ambassador stood and requested an immediate vote on humanity's application. Her voice carried a tone that their translators struggled to render accurately. Respect mixed with caution. The kind of tone prey species used when acknowledging a predator's territory. The vote began within minutes. The security footage from the council station showed what happened next in excruciating detail. 47 minutes after Derek's demonstration, proximity alarms screamed across every frequency. The Rakthian swarm had arrived, their bioships emerging from calculated jump points that should have been impossible to predict. The insectoid species had terrorized the outer colonies for 3 generations, and no military force had ever successfully repelled them once they committed to an assault. Council Station held 18,000 inhabitants from 63 different species. Its defensive fleet consisted of 12 patrol craft designed for customs enforcement, not warfare. The Rakthian swarm sent 200 attack ships, each one a living organism bred specifically for void combat. Their tactics were simple and effective. Overwhelm through numbers, board through breached hulls, consume everything biological. Admiral Karen Foster watched the tactical display in the human delegation's quarters. The Council's defensive coordinator was broadcasting on all channels, calling for evacuation procedures that everyone knew would fail. The Rakthians moved too fast, hit too hard. Transport ships would be destroyed before they could jump to safety. She looked at Derek, who stood beside her, still wearing his combat demonstration clothes. His wounds from the Crothian fight were barely treated. "How many humans do we have on station?" Derek asked. Karen checked her tablet. 43. Mostly diplomatic staff and military observers. Derek nodded slowly. "That's enough." The Rakthian assault followed their standard pattern. Disable communication arrays first, then life support systems, then structural integrity. Create chaos and fear. The first bioship latched onto the station's outer ring, its acid secretions eating through the hull in seconds. Rakthian warriors poured into the breach, their chitinous bodies adapted for zero-gravity combat. They moved like water through the corridors, killing everything in their path. Station security tried to respond. The Pelfarian guards fired their energy weapons, which were designed to stun rather than kill. The Rakthians ignored the stunning shots and tore through the defenders in moments. The Xinthian military observers activated their personal shields and retreated to defensible positions. The shields held for approximately 8 seconds before the Rakthians found the frequency disruption point. Karen made a decision that would haunt Council historical records for generations. She opened a station-wide channel and broadcast 4 words in clear English. "All humans, combat authorization." Derek was already moving. He grabbed a fire axe from an emergency cabinet, tested its weight, and headed toward the nearest breach point. Other humans across the station heard Karen's broadcast and understood immediately. They armed themselves with whatever they could find: maintenance tools, kitchen knives, pieces of broken furniture, bare hands. They didn't form defensive positions. They attacked. The Rakthians had evolved in hive structures where individual sacrifice meant nothing. They expected prey species to flee or hide. They had never encountered a species that responded to invasion by charging directly into combat. The first group of warriors breached into the station's medical bay and found themselves facing 5 human nurses and 2 doctors. The humans had fashioned spears from IV poles and scalpel blades. What happened next was captured on the medical bay's security feed. The humans didn't wait for the Rakthians to organize. They struck first, driving their improvised weapons into the joints where chitin plates met soft tissue. When the weapons broke, they used their hands. When Rakthian acid burned their skin, they kept fighting. One nurse named Lisa Grant lost her left arm to a warrior's mandibles, but used her right hand to drive a bone saw into the creature's brain cluster before collapsing. Derek reached the outer ring breach point, where 40 Rakthians were establishing a beachhead. He didn't slow down. The fire axe caught the first warrior in the neck joint, severing its head completely. He pulled the weapon free and swung again, catching another Rakthian in its central body mass. The blade stuck in the chitinous armor. Derek released it, grabbed the dying alien's mandibles, and used them as weapons against the next warrior. The council members watching from the secure bunker saw everything through the security feeds. They watched humans fight with a ferocity that their xenobiologist had categorized as impossible in sapient species. Intelligent beings were supposed to value their own survival above combat effectiveness. They were supposed to retreat when injured, surrender when overwhelmed, negotiate when threatened. Humans did none of these things. A security team leader named Paul Chen found himself cornered by 6 Rakthian warriors in a storage corridor. His improvised club was broken, his leg was shattered, and his left eye was swollen shut from a previous impact. The Rakthians moved in for the kill. Paul grabbed a canister of industrial solvent from a nearby shelf and threw it at the nearest overhead light panel. The impact shattered both, showering the corridor with flaming liquid. 3 Rakthians died in the initial blast. Paul tackled the 4th while he was still on fire, dragging it to the ground and crushing its brain cluster with his bare hands before he lost consciousness. The pattern repeated across the station. Every human who encountered Rakthians engaged immediately, fighting until they physically couldn't continue. They used tactics the aliens had never seen, ambushes from ventilation shafts, improvised explosives from maintenance chemicals. One human engineer named Greg Martinez reprogrammed a cargo loader to identify Rakthian biosignatures as objects to be crushed. The machine killed 17 warriors before the Rakthians destroyed it. Karen coordinated from the human delegation quarters, turning their section into a command center. She tracked Rakthian movements through the security grid and directed human combatants to interception points. Her tablet showed casualty reports that would have broken most military commanders. 22 humans dead, 15 critically wounded. 6 missing, but the Rakthians were losing. The turning point came at breach point 7. Derek had gathered 6 other humans, including a chef named Mario Rossi, who was fighting with 2 meat cleavers. They faced a concentrated push of 80 Rakthian warriors trying to reach the station's reactor core. If the reactor fell, everyone died. Derek didn't try to defend the entrance. He led his group through a maintenance tunnel that flanked the Rakthian advance. They emerged behind the enemy force and attacked from the rear. The Rakthians had never developed tactics for defending against ambush. Their entire evolutionary history involved overwhelming force from a single direction. The fight lasted 4 minutes. Mario died in the first 30 seconds, buried under 3 Rakthians, but taking 2 of them with him. A security officer named Linda Pierce lost both legs but continued fighting from the ground, pulling warriors down where other humans could reach their vulnerable spots. Derek moved through the combat like he was following a choreographed dance, each strike precise and lethal. When the last Rakthian fell, Derek was the only human still standing. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds. His right arm hung at an unnatural angle, and he could barely see through the blood covering his face. He picked up a Rakthian communication device and crushed it, then collapsed against the wall. The Rakthian swarm withdrew. For the first time in their recorded history, they retreated from an active assault. The bioships that had latched onto Council Station detached and jumped away, leaving behind nearly 300 dead warriors. Their hive mind had calculated something that terrified them at a species level. The humans were winning. In the Council bunker, absolute silence reigned. The representatives watched the security feeds showing human survivors checking on their wounded, securing positions, preparing for another assault that would never come. These weren't soldiers. They were diplomats, engineers, medical staff, and one Marine who had volunteered for a demonstration fight. They had just repelled a Rakthian swarm assault that should have killed everyone on the station. The Crothian delegation leader stood slowly. Its injuries from the earlier demonstration were still being treated, but it managed to speak clearly into the translation system. I move to grant humanity full council membership with immediate effect. All requirements waived. The motion received unanimous support. Karen found Derek in the medical bay 3 hours later. He was unconscious, being treated by a Veltraxian surgical team that specialized in trauma care. The doctor, whose name translated as Careful Hands, looked at Karen with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Your species," the doctor said quietly, should not exist. Every evolutionary model says that sapient predators kill themselves in tribal warfare before achieving space travel. You should have destroyed yourselves 1,000 years ago. Karen watched the medical scanner display Derek's vital signs. But we didn't. No, Careful Hands agreed. You didn't. And now the galaxy has to live with that. The aftermath of the Rakthian assault transformed Council Station into something between a memorial and a crime scene. Forensic teams from 8 different species documented every corridor, every body, every broken weapon. The human casualties were evacuated to specialized medical facilities, though many wouldn't survive despite advanced alien medicine. The Rakthian dead were collected for study. Military analysts wanted to understand how an inferior force had achieved a decisive victory. Derek woke up 4 days later in a hospital ship orbiting the station. His right arm was in a regeneration sleeve. His ribs were held together by medical adhesives that felt like concrete, and his head pounded with a migraine that the doctors said would last another week. Karen sat beside his bed, looking like she hadn't slept since the attack. You've been nominated for something called the Star of Valor, she told him. It's the Council's highest military honor. They've never given it to a human before. Derek closed his eyes. How many did we lose? 31 confirmed dead. 12 more who probably won't make it. Karen's voice was steady, but Derek heard the weight behind the words. You saved 17,000 people, Derek. 17,000. He didn't respond. The numbers felt abstract, disconnected from the reality of watching Mario Rossi die while fighting with kitchen knives, or Lisa Grant losing her arm in the medical bay. Statistics couldn't capture what it felt like to use a dead alien's body parts as weapons, or the sound Paul Chen made when he tackled that Rakthian while burning alive. The Council wants to talk to you, Karen. They want to understand how humans fight. They want to study our tactics, our aggression, our willingness to die for strangers. Derek opened his eyes. What did you tell them? That they wouldn't understand even if I explained it. She paused. The Voltraxian ambassador did some research into Earth's history. She found records of something called the Battle of Thermopylae. She's been showing it to other council members. Through the hospital ship's window, Derek could see Council Station in the distance. Repair drones swarmed over the breach points, sealing the hull damage. Transport ships came and went, bringing supplies and taking away traumatized survivors. The station looked peaceful from this distance, but Derek knew every corridor still smelled like blood and burned flesh. A Thorvian military observer named Kent entered the room without knocking. His species was built like living tanks, 8 feet tall with armored hide that could stop small arms fire. He looked at Derek with eyes that held something between respect and fear. The Rakthian swarm sent a message to the Council, Kent said without preamble. They have declared humanity a prohibited species. They will avoid all human territory, all human allies, all human trade routes. He paused. In 3,000 years of Rakthian expansion, they have never done this before. Karen stood up. What does that mean exactly? It means they're afraid, Kent said simply. The swarm operates on hive calculations. They assess risk versus reward for every assault. Their math now says that fighting humans costs more than any possible gain. He looked directly at Derek. You didn't just win a battle. You changed the galactic balance of power. Derek tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. His ribs screamed in protest. I just wanted to get some water after the demonstration fight. Kenneth made a sound that the translator rendered as bitter laughter. That demonstration changed everything. The council members saw a human defeat a Crothian champion in 90 seconds. They were already afraid. Then the Rakthians attacked, and you proved that fear was justified? He pulled up a holographic display showing casualty comparisons. In previous Rakthian assaults on stations this size, survival rates averaged 3%. Council Station had 80 to 7% survival. Because of 43 humans, the implications settled over the room like heavy smoke. Derek had studied military history. He knew what happened when one group developed a significant advantage over others. Arms races, preemptive strikes, strategic alliances built on fear rather than respect. Humanity had just announced itself as the galaxy's newest apex predator, and the other species would respond accordingly. "Your people need to be careful," Kent said quietly. "The Council granted you full membership, but half the delegates voted yes because they're terrified of voting no. They saw what humans do to enemies. They don't want to become enemies." Karen crossed her arms. "Are you saying the Council is going to turn against us?" "I'm saying the Council doesn't know what to do with you." Kent gestured at the display. Every species in the galaxy evolved along predictable lines. Herbivores became traders and diplomats. Omnivores became engineers and explorers. Predators either died out or were contained on their home worlds. Then humans show up and break every rule. He zoomed in on footage from the Rakthian attack. "You're predators who cooperate. You're violent but controlled. You die for strangers. None of this should be possible." The door opened again. This time it was the Veltraxian ambassador whose name translated as "She Who Remembers Dawn." She moved with the careful grace of a species that had survived by being perpetually alert. Her large eyes took in the room's occupants before settling on Derek. "May I speak with you privately?" she asked. Karen and Kent exchanged glances, but left without argument. Dawn waited until the door closed before speaking again. "I need you to understand what you've started," she said. "The video of your fight with the Crothian champion has been viewed 8 billion times across Council networks. The footage of the Rakthian assault has been downloaded by every military organization in the known galaxy. Humans are now the most studied species in existence." Derek managed to prop himself up slightly. "Is that a problem? It's complicated." Dawn pulled up her own holographic display showing analysis reports from dozens of different species. The optimists think humanity will revolutionize galactic security. The Rakthians have been an existential threat for generations, and you made them retreat. The pessimists think humanity will start a war that consumes the entire Council. The realists think both scenarios are possible. What do you think?" Derek asked. "I think humans are exactly what my species needed to see." Dawn's expression was difficult to read, but her voice held conviction. "We evolved as prey. Our entire civilization is built around avoiding conflict, negotiating, compromising. We've survived by being useful and non-threatening. Then, we watched you fight." She changed the display to show evolutionary models. "Every prey species in the galaxy shares the same trauma. We remember the predators that hunted us. We remember hiding, running, watching our people die. Most predator species went extinct or were domesticated. The few that survived learned to suppress their hunting instincts. We thought the age of predators was over." She looked directly at Derek. "You proved us wrong. Humans are what predators become when they don't go extinct. You're what happens when the apex hunters develop technology and ethics and cooperation." "That doesn't answer what you think about us," Derek pointed out. "I think you're terrifying," Dawn said honestly. "I think every instinct my species developed over millions of years is screaming at me to run from you. I also think you're exactly what the galaxy needs. The Rakthians aren't the only threat out there. There are dangers we haven't encountered yet, enemies we can't imagine. Having humans on our side might be the difference between survival and extinction." Derek laid back, exhausted. "You're saying we're the guard dog?" Dawn considered that. "No. Guard dogs are controlled by their owners. You're more like wolves who chose to live near the village. Dangerous, independent, but aligned with our interests. For now. The conversation was interrupted by alarms. Not attack alarms this time, but priority communication alerts. Karen rushed back into the room, her tablet showing incoming data streams. The Crothian Empire just declared a military alliance with humanity, she announced. So did the Thorvian Federation. And the Peltharian Union. She kept scrolling. We're getting requests for defense pacts from 6 other species, trade agreements from 12 more, and cultural exchange programs from everyone else. Dawn stood. It begins. The species who saw you fight want you as allies. The species who heard about it want to understand you. The species who fear you want to know your intentions. She moved toward the door. The Council is convening an emergency session to discuss humanity's role in galactic affairs. They want a human representative there. Karen looked at Derek. You're the obvious choice. Absolutely not, Derek said immediately. Send a diplomat. Send someone trained for this. You are the diplomat now, Dawn said from the doorway. Whether you want to be or not, you're the human who defeated a Crothian champion and survived a Rakthian assault. Your voice carries weight that no trained diplomat could match. She paused. The galaxy needs to hear what humans want. They need to know if we should fear you or trust you, or both. The hospital ship's medical staff cleared Derek for limited activity 6 hours later against his doctor's recommendations and his own better judgment. They fitted him with a support exoskeleton that held his damaged body together while his injuries healed. He looked like a broken toy held together with wire and hope, but he could stand and walk and speak, which apparently made him qualified for galactic diplomacy. The council chamber had been repaired since the Rakthian attack. New walls covered the breach points, new systems replaced the damaged computers, new furniture filled the spaces where the old had been destroyed. But everyone in the room remembered what had happened here. The fear lingered like smoke. 347 council members from 63 species watched as Derek entered. He moved slowly, each step clearly painful despite the exoskeleton. Karen walked beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. The Veltraxian ambassador had arranged for a human-appropriate chair near the central speaking platform, acknowledging that Derek couldn't stand for extended periods. The council's head administrator, a Nexelian named Complex Thought Pattern, called the session to order. The translation systems rendered his clicks and whistles into hundreds of different languages simultaneously. We gather to address the human question, he announced. Humanity has been granted full council membership through emergency procedures. Now, we must determine what that membership means. What role will humans play in galactic affairs? What responsibilities will they accept? What limitations will they observe? Derek listened as various council members spoke. Some praised humanity's combat effectiveness and proposed military alliances. Others expressed concern about human aggression and suggested restrictions on human population expansion. A few called for extensive study of human psychology before allowing broader integration. The Crothian delegation notably said nothing. Their champion's defeat had destroyed their political credibility. After an hour of debate, Complex Thought Pattern turned to Derek. The council recognizes the human representative. Please address the questions raised. Derek stood carefully, the exoskeleton whirring softly. He hadn't prepared a speech. Karen had urged him to work with the diplomatic staff to craft something appropriate, but Derek had refused. Whatever he said needed to be honest, not polished. You want to know what humans want, he began. You want to know if we're going to be peaceful partners or violent threats. You want guarantees that we won't turn our combat abilities against the Council. He paused. I can't give you those guarantees. No one can. Uncomfortable shifting rippled through the chamber. Here's what I can tell you, Derek continued. Humans fight when we need to fight. We don't enjoy violence, despite what you saw on those security feeds. Every human who died defending this station would have preferred to be doing their actual jobs. The nurses wanted to heal people. The engineers wanted to fix things. I wanted to drink some water and go home. He gestured at his bandaged body. None of us wanted this. Then why did you fight so effectively? Asked a Pelfarian delegate. Why didn't you surrender or negotiate? Because surrender meant everyone dies, Derek said simply. The Rakthians don't negotiate. They consume. We've seen species like them in our own history. We know what happens when predators meet prey. The prey dies unless they fight back. But you are predators, another delegate pointed out. You have the advantages. Why risk yourselves for other species? Derek thought about Mario Rossi fighting with meat cleavers, Lisa Grant losing her arm, Paul Chen burning alive, because that's what humans do. We protect others. Sometimes we protect our own tribes, our own nations. Sometimes we protect strangers. It depends on the situation and the person. But when we see something threatening innocence, we tend to intervene. The Thorvian military observer, Kent, stood. I have a question. When you were fighting the Rakthians, you could have retreated to the human quarters and defended that single position. You had enough personnel to hold one section of the station. Instead, you spread out and fought across multiple breach points. Why? Because 17,000 people were counting on us, Derek said. We didn't come to the Council to be another isolated species, protecting only themselves. We came to be part of something larger. He sat down, exhausted. Karen handed him a water bottle. The council chamber remained silent as the delegates processed his words. Complex thought pattern conferred with his advisors before speaking again. The council will vote on several proposals regarding humanity's integration. But first, I have a personal question for the human representative. His translation software carried unusual emphasis. You fought for strangers. You watched your people die for species you'd never met before. You nearly died yourself. Would you do it again? Derek didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? Because someone has to, Derek said. Because the Rakthians will attack again somewhere. Because there are other threats out there. Because the strong should protect the weak when they can. He looked around the chamber. You asked what humans want. We want to be part of the council. We want to trade and learn and explore. But if something threatens the council, we'll fight. That's not a threat or a promise. It's just who we are. The voting began. Humanity's full membership was confirmed unanimously, which Karen later explained was unprecedented. The Council approved a joint defense initiative with human military advisors. They established cultural exchange programs, trade agreements, and research partnerships. They also, notably, created a new council position called Species Integration Monitor, whose job was to watch humanity and ensure we didn't become the next galactic threat. Dawn received that assignment. She told Derek later that she volunteered because prey species understand predators better than anyone. She would watch humanity with the attention her ancestors used to watch for dangers in the grass. But she would also work to help humans integrate, to build bridges between predator and prey species, to prove that the old evolutionary divisions didn't have to define galactic society. Derek spent 3 more weeks in recovery before he was cleared to return to Earth. The hospital ship's medical team had performed miracles, but he would carry scars from the Rakthian assault for the rest of his life. Physical scars on his body, emotional scars in his memory. He dreamed about the fight most nights, waking up reaching for weapons that weren't there. The transport ship that carried him home made a stop at Council Station. Derek requested permission to visit the memorial they'd erected in the main concourse. 31 names were carved into a wall of polished stone imported from 7 different worlds. Human names surrounded by alien script, honoring the dead in dozens of languages. Mario Rossi's name was third from the top. Lisa Grant's was near the bottom. Paul Chen's was in the middle. Derek stood before the wall for a long time, reading each name, remembering each face. These were the people who'd changed galactic history, not politicians or generals or diplomats. A chef, a nurse, a security officer, ordinary people who'd done extraordinary things because the situation demanded it. Karen found him there an hour later. The transport is ready to depart. Derek nodded but didn't move. Do you think it was worth it? 31 people dead so humanity could join the council. Karen stood beside him. I think 31 people died, saving 17,000 others. The council membership is just what came after. She touched Mario's name gently. They didn't die for politics. They died because Rakthians were killing innocents and they could do something about it. The transport journey to Earth took 6 days. Derek spent most of it in his cabin, avoiding the other passengers. Word had spread about what happened at Council Station. People wanted to talk to him, to hear stories, to understand how humans had defeated the Rakthian swarm. Derek had no interest in being a celebrity or hero. He just wanted to go home. Earth looked exactly the same as when he'd left. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. The planet had no idea what had happened at Council Station. Most people didn't even know about the Rakthian assault yet. The news cycle was still catching up with galactic events. Derek wondered how humanity would react when they learned what their species was capable of. Would they be proud or horrified? Both seemed likely. The landing facility in California was empty except for military personnel. Karen had arranged for a private arrival to avoid media attention. A general named Patricia Reeves met them at the gate. She had the look of someone who'd spent 40 years in uniform and regretted none of it. You've caused quite a situation, she told Derek after the initial greetings. Every alien species in the council wants to study humans now. We're fielding requests for military exchanges, cultural programs, psychological research. Everyone wants to understand how we fight. So what happens now? Derek asked. Now you rest, Reeves said. Take leave, see your family, recover from your injuries. We'll handle the diplomatic aftermath. She paused. But eventually, we're going to need people like you. People who understand both human capabilities and alien perspectives. People who can bridge the gap. Derek looked at Karen. Is that what I'm supposed to be now? A bridge? You already are, Karen said. You proved humans could fight alongside other species. You showed that predators and prey can cooperate. That's more valuable than any weapon or technology. The military facility had arranged quarters for Derek while he processed his discharge paperwork. The room was small and clean and felt strange after weeks on alien ships. Derek sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. 3 months ago, he'd been a regular Marine. Now he was the face of humanity's galactic integration, the symbol of human combat capability, the person who'd scared an entire species into retreat. He thought about the Veltraxian ambassador's words. Wolves who chose to live near the village. That felt accurate. Humans would never be domesticated, never be completely safe, never lose the predator instincts that evolution had given them. But they could choose where to direct those instincts. They could choose to protect rather than hunt, to defend rather than conquer, to cooperate rather than dominate. Karen visited him that evening with a tablet full of messages, governments from every continent wanting to meet with him. Universities offering research positions, media companies requesting interviews. Private military contractors with job offers that made his military salary look like pocket change. Derek declined everything. What are you going to do? Karen asked. I don't know yet, Derek admitted. Return to duty, maybe. Train other Marines for potential alien conflicts. Try to forget what Paul Chen sounded like when he was burning alive. He closed his eyes. The galaxy thinks humans are these perfect warriors. They don't understand the cost. Karen sat beside him. The Council's psychological services want to provide support for the human survivors. They have therapists from species that have experienced similar trauma. It might help. Maybe, Derek said. He doubted alien therapists could understand human guilt, but he appreciated the offer. 3 months later, Derek returned to active duty. The military had created a new division called Xenorelations, focused on training humans for potential conflict with alien species. Derek was assigned as an instructor, teaching combat techniques adapted for non-human opponents. He was good at the work, but it felt hollow. Every time he demonstrated a takedown or strike point, he remembered using those same techniques against Rakthians while his friends died around him. The galaxy changed in that time. Humanity's integration into the Council proceeded smoothly, largely because other species were too afraid to obstruct it. The Rakthians withdrew from 3 contested systems without fighting, abandoning territory they'd held for decades. The Crothians requested human military advisors to improve their own combat doctrine. Even the species that had never left their homeworld sent delegations to Earth, curious about the predators who'd changed everything. Derek watched the news coverage with mixed feelings. Reporters called him the hero of Council Station, the Marine who saved thousands, the face of human power. They never mentioned Mario Rossi or Lisa Grant or Paul Chen. They never talked about the 28 other humans who'd died defending aliens they'd never met. The story became about human strength, not human sacrifice. Dawn visited Earth 6 months after the Council Station assault. She'd been traveling among human communities, studying their culture, writing reports for the Council. She met Derek at a coffee shop in San Diego, far from military bases and diplomatic centers. They sat outside in the sunshine, surrounded by humans going about their daily lives. "I've been to 37 human cities on 6 continents," Dawn told him. "I've interviewed hundreds of people. I've studied your history, your literature, your art. I'm trying to understand what makes you different. Did you figure it out?" Derek asked. "Partially," Dawn said. "Humans carry contradictions that shouldn't be possible. You're violent, but compassionate. Selfish, but self-sacrificing. Individual, but cooperative. Your species should have destroyed itself, but instead you've built civilizations that last millennia." She watched the humans around them. "You're not really predators anymore. You've evolved past that. But you kept the tools predators need, the aggression, the focus, the willingness to kill. You just learned to aim those tools at new targets. Like the Rakthians," Derek said. "Like anyone who threatens what you care about." Dawn's large eyes reflected the sunlight. "That's what terrifies most Council species. You're not just strong. You're strong and you care. That combination is unprecedented." They talked for 2 hours. Dawn shared stories from her travels, insights into how different human cultures approached violence and cooperation. Derek talked about his work training soldiers, about the nightmares that still came most nights, about trying to reconcile the person he'd been before Council Station with the person he was now. "The galaxy sees you as a symbol," Dawn said eventually. "The first human to prove what your species can do. That's a heavy burden." "I didn't ask for it," Derek pointed out. "No one asks to change history," Dawn agreed. "But you did anyway. And now you have to live with that." She stood to leave. "The Council is planning a commemoration ceremony at the station. They want the human survivors there. They want you there." Derek didn't respond immediately. The thought of returning to Council Station, of seeing those corridors where he'd fought and bled and watched people die, made his chest tight. But Dawn was right. History had happened, and he'd been part of it. Running away wouldn't change that. "I'll think about it," he said finally. The ceremony happened 3 months later. Council Station had been fully repaired, all traces of the Rakthian assault erased except for the memorial wall. Representatives from all 63 Council species attended. The 12 surviving humans who'd fought in the assault were given seats of honor in the main chamber. Complex Thought Pattern spoke first, his translation rendering ancient Nexilian poetry into human languages. He talked about sacrifice and courage and the bonds between species. Other delegates followed, each offering perspectives from their own cultures. The Crothian delegate notably bowed deeply to the humans present, a gesture that their species reserved for honored enemies. Dawn gave the final speech. She stood before the assembled council and spoke about evolution and survival and the relationship between predators and prey. Her words were translated into hundreds of languages, but Derek heard them in clear English through his earpiece. "For millions of years, my species lived in fear of predators," she said. "We survived by hiding, by running, by being too small and quick and clever to catch. We made ourselves harmless so the predators would ignore us. We built our entire civilization on that foundation of fear. Then humans arrived and showed us that predators could be different. They could choose to protect instead of hunt. They could use their strength for others." She looked directly at the human survivors. "You didn't have to fight for us. We weren't your people. We weren't your responsibility. But you fought anyway. You died for strangers, and in doing so you proved that the old categories don't matter anymore. Predator and prey can stand together, can fight together, can build something better together." The applause that followed was strange. Different species clapped or clicked or hummed according to their customs. Derek stood with the other survivors and accepted the recognition. But his mind was elsewhere, thinking about Mario and Lisa and Paul and the 28 others whose names were carved into that memorial wall. After the ceremony, Derek walked through the repaired corridors. Karen accompanied him in silence, understanding that he needed to retrace the battle. He found the spot where he'd fought the 40 Raktians, where Mario had died with meat cleavers in his hands. The walls were new, the floor was clean, but Derek could still see the blood. "Do you think they understand?" He asked Karen, the aliens who watched us fight. "Do they really understand what it cost?" Karen considered the question. "Some do. Dawn understands, I think. She lived as prey for her entire evolutionary history. She knows about sacrifice and fear. Others see the strength without seeing the scars." She touched Derek's shoulder. "But that's okay. We don't need them to understand completely. We just need them to remember that humans paid the price for this peace." They stood there for a long time, 2 humans in a repaired alien station remembering a battle that had changed galactic civilization. Around them, the station hummed with life and activity. Trade ships docked and departed, diplomats negotiated treaties. Scientists exchanged research. The council functioned because 31 humans had fought and died to keep it alive. Derek looked at the memorial wall one final time before leaving Council Station. 31 names. 31 people who'd answered violence with violence, who'd chosen to fight when they could have hidden, who'd sacrificed themselves for strangers. The galaxy called them heroes. Derek called them what they were, his friends. His comrades. The people who'd shown him what humanity really meant. The transport ship carried him back to Earth, back to his life, his duties, his attempts to process what he'd experienced. He would continue training soldiers for conflicts that might never come. He would carry the scars from Council Station until the day he died. He would wake up from nightmares about Rakthians and burning friends and choices made in impossible circumstances. But he would also carry something else. The knowledge that humanity had proven itself to the galaxy. Not through technology or diplomacy or trade, but through the most basic human quality. The willingness to stand between the innocent and harm, to fight when necessary. to die if required. The galaxy had seen humanity's predator mode activate, live and unfiltered, and they had learned what humans were capable of when pushed to the edge. That was the legacy of Council Station, not the violence or the victory or the political aftermath, but the simple, terrible, beautiful truth that humans would fight for others, even aliens, even strangers, even when it cost everything. The galaxy watched humanity's predator instincts engage in real time, and they learned that human predators protected the herd instead of culling it. That was the difference. That was what made humanity unique. That was what changed everything. Derek looked out the transport window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Rakthians were avoiding human territory. The Crothians were learning from human tactics. The Council was debating humanity's role in galactic security. History was moving forward, shaped by 90 seconds of combat footage and 4 minutes of desperate fighting in a dying station. He thought about what Dawn had said. Wolves who chose to live near the village. That felt right. Humanity would never lose its capacity for violence. Evolution had given humans too many tools, too many instincts, too much ability to harm. But those tools could serve different purposes. Protect instead of hunt. Defend instead of conquer. Build instead of destroy. The galaxy would learn to live with human predators. They would form alliances, trade partnerships, cultural exchanges. They would watch humanity carefully, always aware that the violence could return if necessary, but they would also sleep better knowing that humanity stood between them and the darkness. That when the Rakthians came, or the next threat emerged, or the galaxy needed warriors who fought for others rather than themselves, humans would answer that call. It wasn't the future anyone had expected, but it was the future they had. And Derek would spend the rest of his life trying to make sure humanity lived up to the reputation they'd earned in blood and sacrifice at Council Station. The galaxy had seen what humans could do. Now humans had to prove they could be trusted with that power. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But as Derek watched Earth grow larger in the transport window, he felt something unexpected. Hope. Hope that humanity would use its strength wisely. Hope that predators and prey could build something better together. Hope that the 31 names on that memorial wall would mean something beyond violence and death. They would mean the beginning of a new era. An era where strength served others. Where violence protected peace. Where humanity's predator instincts finally found a purpose that justified their terrible cost.